Hello class, welcome back to EDUC 1300. In previous lessons, we've discussed how you, as an individual, can succeed in college by setting realistic goals and dreams and by making wise choices. However, in this section we'll depart from that format and look at how working with others can help you succeed in college and in life. So with that premise in mind, let's get started. Whether we realize it or not, all of us make a choice about the kinds of relationships we have with other people, and those choices have a huge impact on our success in college and beyond. Successful students realize they may need the help of others to succeed. However, struggling students have a hard time building mutually supportive relationships for many reasons. First, they remain dependent, codependent, or independent in their relation to others. Secondly, they listen poorly, demonstrating little desire to understand another person's perspective. Also, they judge others who are different as inappropriate, wrong, or bad. So what do we mean when we talk about students who are dependent, codependent, or independent in their relationships to others? Well, when we talk about someone who is dependent, we're referring to someone who avoids responsibility, complains, blames others, tells lies, and avoids the consequences of his or her actions. Dependent people avoid developing essential qualities and skills that support adult long-term happiness. Therefore, dependent students spend all of their energy manipulating other people to do for them what they will not do for themselves. On the other hand, codependent students follow a pattern of behavior in which they find themselves dependent on the approval of someone else for their own self-worth and identity. One key sign of codependency is when your sense of purpose in life wraps around making extreme sacrifices to satisfy someone else's needs. Finally, independent students are classified as being self-reliant, self-empowered, and capable of providing for their own needs, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. As we grow older, we begin making progress towards independence. Also, in our independent stages of life, we build purpose, direction, and trust for ourselves. We are powerful within our own energy and know that we can rely on ourselves to provide for us. So you may be asking yourself, why is independence a bad thing? The truth is, there are times when independence is an essential key to success in college and in life. However, our ultimate goal should be to progress towards interdependence. When we are interdependent, we are a whole and balanced person who is able to share with and join in the healthy resources of life and others. This facilitates an even greater expansion in life than the independent stage, as we now have unlimited access to even more love, success, and happiness than we could have provided for ourselves. So, with those definitions in mind, let's look at some statements each of these students make. First, a dependent student may say, I can't do this by myself, and look for ways to manipulate others into doing his or her work. On the other hand, a codependent student may say, I have to help others before I can help myself. Therefore, this student will spend too much of his or her time operating in quadrant 3 and put everyone else's goals and dreams ahead of his or her own. Still, independent students may say, I can do this all by myself and I don't need anyone's help. Although that belief may be true, unfortunately this student will miss out on opportunities to network with other students that could help him or her grow as a person. Therefore, our ultimate goal should be to move towards being an interdependent student. When we reach interdependence, we realize we can do some of this alone, but will accomplish more with the help of others. However, before we move towards interdependence, we may need to examine some of our beliefs about independence versus working with others. Like many things in your life, your culture may have programmed you to believe in independence over interdependence. In fact, there is probably no other area where cultures are more clearly different than in their beliefs about the role that people play in one another's lives. According to researcher Gert Hofstede, mainstream North American culture is strongly individualistic. Strong individualistic cultures have an I or me orientation, and independence is highly regarded. Therefore, when we subscribe to the beliefs of an individualistic culture, we admire those who have pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps, and we prize the idea of a self made man or woman. However, strong collectivistic cultures have a we or us orientation, and interdependence is highly regarded. In Latino, Asian, and Native American cultures, social harmony and family honor is the norm. Therefore, in these cultures, they respect those who fit in and enhance the welfare of the group. So, which cultural belief is right? Simply put, there are advantages and disadvantages to each cultural perspective. Sure, there is a time to be independent, but there is also a time to reach out to others for support and be part of a support system for someone else. Therefore, ask yourself this question. If 1 is a strong individualistic culture and 10 is a strong collectivistic culture, where do you see yourself on this continuum? Once you've identified where you fall on that continuum, realize that you can move towards one perspective or another as needed. Regardless of your culture or upbringing, there will be a time and place to value each perspective. After all, creators see beyond their cultural programming and respond appropriately when faced with challenges. So as you move through college, how can you move towards interdependence? One way is to identify those people or groups that can help make your journey a little easier instead of acting alone each step along the way. Oprah Winfrey once said, "For every one of us that succeeds, it's because there's somebody there to show you the way out. The light doesn't always necessarily have to be in your family. For me, it was teachers and school." Even if you come from a strong individualistic culture, learning to reach out to others can greatly enhance your college experience. In other words, you may need to turn to others to help you find your way. With that in mind, let's discuss some resources that could help you overcome obstacles while in college. First, if you're confused about what future courses you should take, you could go to advising. There, you will meet with an academic advisor who will review your various degree requirements against your transcript and offer suggestions for upcoming classes. Secondly, if you're having academic problems or trouble in the classroom, you may need to turn to the tutoring lab. Now, I know what many of you may be thinking. Some of you may feel like you're dumb if you turn to a tutor for help. However, that belief couldn't be more deceptive. No one is perfect, and we will all likely struggle with academic subjects from time to time. Therefore, it becomes important for each of us to reach out to those who may be stronger in a particular subject for help. Admitting you need help is not a sign of weakness. Instead, it is a real sign of strength and shows real maturity on your part. Third, we've already discussed how money problems can affect your success in college. We've also talked about various loans, grants, and scholarships that are available to help pay for your classes. However, if you should need additional help in applying for these funding sources, you may need to visit with representatives from the Financial Aid Office. The staff in these offices are uniquely aware of the challenges facing college students in regards to money, and they are the personnel responsible for dispensing all of the grants and scholarships for the college. Therefore, when the burden of paying for college becomes too much, you can turn to these professionals for help. In addition to money problems, sometimes students may deal with serious personal problems. In those instances, many colleges and universities refer their students to the counseling office. There, students can meet with trained counselors who can help you talk through your personal problems and offer additional help when needed. Now, I would like to clarify one thing. Many times, I will hear students say they have to attend a meeting with their counselor when they are really referring to their academic advisor. There is a difference between the two. Sure, some counselors may serve as academic advisors, but an academic advisor and counselor vary greatly in their training. Academic advisors primarily deal with helping students choose courses and assist them in transfer counseling. However, counselors go a step further. Often, counselors hold additional certifications that allow them to help students deal with problems that may be hindering a student, whether it's physically or emotionally. Therefore, if you're experiencing some form of personal problem, make sure you seek out a counselor whenever possible. Additionally, there are other resources available to you as a college student. If you are experiencing any type of health problem, many schools and universities now offer some form of health services for their students. These facilities will vary from school to school and could range from a part-time on-campus nurse to a full-service clinic. Also, some major universities may have teaching hospitals that will offer health services for little or no cost to students. Therefore, if you're not feeling your best, look for the health services office at your school. Finally, we've talked about how finding value through college experiences can help you succeed as a student. However, many students don't know where to go to get involved socially at their college. In such an instance, the Student Activities Office can be a great resource to help you get plugged into campus life. This office often produces on-campus events and often works with many of the clubs and organizations on campus. Therefore, when you're trying to get more out of your college experience, turn towards the Student Activities Office for help. In addition to the various resources available to you on campus, often working within groups can help you move from independence to interdependence. In fact, Yuri Treisman, a mathematics grad student at the University of California, Berkeley, completed a study in the late 1970s and early 1980s that highlighted the value of working in groups. He noticed that successful students in calculus met outside of the classroom and talked about how to solve the various equations. Struggling students did not. Therefore, Treisman created a program where struggling students networked with other students to create study groups to solve challenging problems. The result was a huge success and has since been adopted by many in higher education. Now, before we move on, I know what some of you may be thinking. You're probably saying to yourself, I've worked on group projects before and they were a disaster. After all, I had to do all of the work. However, I want to point out that a study group differs greatly from a project team in two ways. First, a study group is created to help everyone on the team excel in a particular course. Secondly, the group meets multiple times throughout the semester. Additionally, study groups offer a number of benefits that go beyond a project team. In study groups, as participation increases, there is a higher level of active involvement with course material, which leads to deeper learning and, therefore, higher grades. In other words, iron sharpens iron. So one group member sharpens another as they study collaboratively. Additionally, a study group exposes you to different cultures and belief systems which may make you think about materials from a different perspective, which, after all, is part of the college culture. However, before you create a study group, you need to consider a few things to maximize the value of a study group. First, you need to determine what criteria you will have for choosing group members. I would suggest that your first priority be to choose only creators. After all, you want people who will put as much care and effort into the group as you will. So, when you're considering forming a study group, look for those who actively participate in your class. Also, look for those who work diligently and submit their assignments on time. Secondly, when you start a study group, you need to consider what goals you would like the group to have. Regardless of potential, a study group is only as effective as you make it. Therefore, you should choose group goals. After all, when you have a common goal, you'll have a common focus to work towards as a group. Finally, you'll need to determine what rules you want the group to have. So, make sure you choose group rules. We all know that groups have the potential to turn into social gatherings. Therefore, you will need rules to stay on task and outline expectations for all of those involved. As we conclude this lesson, I would like to offer some final thoughts. As a student, it's often easy to accept the belief that you are in this by yourself. Sure, there are a multitude of tasks that must be completed on your own. But I strongly encourage you to look for opportunities to network with others. Whether you're involved in a club or organization, or you find a sense of community by participating in a study group, I truly believe getting involved is important to your success in college. So, if you haven't already, get involved. You'll be glad that you did. That concludes the information for this lesson. See you next time.